please stand for the reading of the message text, which is 1 Kings 18, 19 through 24. This is Elijah's message to Ahab. Now therefore have all Israel assemble for me at Mount Carmel, with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent all the Israelites and assembled the prophets at Mount Carmel. Elijah then came near to all people and said, "How long will you go limping with two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him." The people did not answer him a word. Then Elijah said to the people, I, even I only, am left a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophet number 450. Let 2 bulls be given to us. Let them choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it into pieces, lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire is indeed God. All the people answered, well spoken. You may be seated, and the kids may head off into that direction for Children's Church. So we're moving into a new series. And I talked about this earlier in the year, and actually today's message, for those of you who were here during some of our Lenten Wednesday night worships, we did a kind of a conversational devotional over this story. This is one of my favorite narratives in the Bible. I'm careful not to say story, because sometimes when you say story, people think it's fictional. It's just some fanciful story. But this is a narrative. This is what actually happened. And it's important for us to realize when we read some of these stories, when we hear some of these stories in the Bible, they are depictions of what actually occurred. And so this is our starting point for the stories of Elijah and Elisha, prophets of God. And this is one of my favorite narratives in the Bible. I've got a few that are some of my favorites, but we're going to do something a little different than I normally do. We're going to kind of, I guess in, seminary terms, we would say we're going to go through an exegesis, kind of verse by verse talking about this, and then I'll give a little summary at the end, but there's a lot of power in this story. And this builds on what we've been talking about, church as a human chain, and what it means for us to grow in our relationship with God. And what we begin to see as we move into the stories, the narratives of Elijah and Elisha, is what happens when we find ourselves merging and being transformed into the image of God. What happens when we step into that place that God is calling us to step into, the place of cleansing and the place of power and the place of transformation. What begins to happen in our lives, not just in our lives, but around our lives and through our lives. That's why you may have caught on to the pattern. So often I end our prayer with, thank you, God, for what you are up to in us, around us, and through us. Because God is up to something great in you. And when we allow that transformation to occur within us, lots of good happens around us because God is flowing through us. And so we're starting to see that as we put some of these things into practice, some of the things we talked about with spiritual disciplines and together as a church, how we worship, how we fellowship, how we serve, all those things, as we start to live that out, as that becomes a part of who we actually are, and then as that flows out of us, amazing things can happen. And so let's jump into this to set the stage. Israel had not seen rain in 3 years, not a drop of rain. We talk about drought. We've never seen a drought like that. Not a drop of rain for 3 years. And in the time that no rain was actually symbolic of the presence of God. And so no one in Israel had seen or heard God in 3 years. And the reason for that was because of their disobedience. They had begun worshiping other gods. They'd neglected their altars and their worship of the one true God, and they started dabbling in all of these other gods. And so God withheld his reign and withheld his presence for 3 years. And so when we jump into this story, this is Elijah being poked by God to say, okay, now's the time. Ready, go. And so this week, it's kind of cool because this week I've been dealing with my allergies. Once in the fall, once in the spring, I get smacked with my allergies. And I sometimes get this cool voice. Gene heard it on Friday when we talked on the phone. My voice is back to pretty close to normal. But what I like about this is, like, I get what I call my Optimus Prime voice when my allergies hit. It used to be way cooler. When I was teaching, when my allergies would hit, I'd get this really deep, silky smooth, like Barry White kind of voice. And so if you can learn biology from Barry White, it's pretty cool. Like, it makes biology so much cooler. But now it's more of a gravelly. And so this is God telling Elijah, basically, Autobots, roll out. It's, and so I just thought, I just like it when my voice is like, I would be so much cooler if my voice was always like that. But, maybe I would be just cool. Maybe not so much cooler. I would just finally cross the threshold of coolness if my voice was always this low. But it's just getting back to my normal voice. But 1 Kings, let's get back to the point. 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 19 through 39 is the full story. We just read part of it earlier. But this is Elijah coming to Ahab, the king, and saying, now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel. Now, what's important for us to realize, Mount Carmel, this is a showdown on Baal's territory. Mount Carmel is the home court advantage of Baal. That is where they worshiped Baal. So Elijah goes to the king and he says, okay, let's all gather in my enemy's territory. They even say to this day, weird stuff happens on Mount Carmel. To this day, there's just odd things occurring. I can't say any of it is true, but if you Google it, seriously, like, there's weird things going on Mount Carmel, because that is the place of worship of Baal. And so Elijah, first of all, he says, we're gonna have a showdown, we're gonna have a battle royale, and I'm going into enemy territory. I'm gonna give you the home field advantage. That's where we're gonna go. And bring the 450 prophets of Baal, the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So bring all 850 of the prophets of those false gods. Bring them. And me and the one true God are going to have a battle royale with your false gods and the 850 prophets. Let's go. Roll out. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him. So Elijah says, stop straddling the fence. Stop trying to play both sides, a little bit of the one true God here, a little bit of all that pleasure seeking, all that other stuff, a little bit of that over here. If I do this right, I can get the best of both worlds. Elijah says, absolutely not. Stop it. We talked before in the last couple months, we've talked about how God feels about being double-minded. If you're not truly committed to him, I shared a story months ago, a little story that I read about, on one side of the fence is pure darkness, on the other side of the fence is beauty and light. But on the dark side of the fence, there's a whole lot of pleasure. And so sometimes we think we can sit on that fence and there's a voice in the darkness saying, choose me, and that's evil. And there's God on this side saying, choose me and find pure life and joy. And so sometimes we sit on the fence. When we make our decision, we need to make a decision between one side or the other, we sit on the fence. And once we decide to sit on the fence, everything goes black. And we hear Satan's voice saying, the fence is mine. Because we can't worship God and other gods. If we choose the fence, we choose the dark side. And that's what Elijah is saying to the people. How long will you waver? Choose. Stop playing games. God doesn't play games. Choose. Pick your side. You can't play both sides. Don't be half-hearted. If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. He's echoing back something that happened generations earlier. In Joshua 24, verses 16 through 18, the Israelite people are asked to choose this day whom you will serve. That may be a familiar passage. Choose this day whom you will serve. And the Israelite people said, we will serve the Lord. We're going to stop playing games. We're going to stop dabbling in all this other stuff. We will serve the Lord. So Elijah is throwing down that gauntlet and saying, choose this day who you're going to serve. You're going to serve the dark side, or you're going to serve the one true God. This time the people said nothing. They stayed silent. So Elijah said, all right, here we go. Then Elijah said to him, I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has his 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophet choose one for themselves and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but do not set fire to it. So what Elijah does here is he's stacking the deck in Baal's favor. So first of all, he didn't say, all right, send out your best one. One-on-one, we're going to do this. He said, no, you know what? You can have your 450 of Baal. Throw in your 400 prophets of Asherah as well. All 850 of you, pick 2 bulls. You can choose the best one. Because oftentimes in our mindset, the best sacrifice is the one that looks the best, the strongest, the most strapping bull, the healthiest bull. Ooh, you know what? They could have chosen one really strong, healthy, strapping bull and one sickly, weak, horrible little bull and said, we're really going to screw this up for him because we're going to take the best sacrifice. We're going to sacrifice this one, and we'll give him the crummy sacrifice. So Elijah just says, okay, all 850 of you, you pick your bull, cut it up, put it on your altar, but don't set fire to it. So he's stacking the deck against God. 850 to 1. You pick the bulls. I'll take the leftovers. You take the choice, I'll take the leftovers. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. So third thing, he's letting them start. You guys go ahead, you go first. Take as much time as you need to make this happen, to show that for Baal, to show his presence. You do it first, I'll come next. The God who answers by fire, he is God. So the thing is, fire, Baal was the god of sun and storms. Fire is his thing, right? If you're the god of the sun, fire is your deal. So Elijah said, okay, 850 to 1, you choose the bull, you can go first. Fire is the key. Well, of course they're going to say, this is awesome. Yes, we'll take that challenge. Because realize it had been 3 years, not a drop of rain. I imagine there were a few of these signs around. So it doesn't take much to light a fire when there has not been a drop of rain in 3 years, right? So Elijah says, okay, all this in your favor. Your God is the God of fire, so bring on the fire. You call him, you do whatever you need to do. You go first. They're like, oh, piece of cake. I sneeze and I set a fire. So what happens? Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls, prepare it first. See, Elijah's little, we would call him spicy in the Eliason house. Snarky, sarcastic. We make it sound a little better and we call it spicy. So Elijah gets a little spicy with them. He's like, well, since there's so many of you, I'm just by myself. All you, there's so many of you. You can go first since there's so many of you. Call in the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given and they prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. There was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar. So from morning until noon, they're shouting, they're doing their thing around the altar. They were dancing, they were shouting around this altar for hours. Dancing and shouting, waiting for the God of fire to light a fire when fire was easy to come by. Dancing and shouting around their altar. Nothing. No response. Nobody answered. So at noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Okay, Elijah's spicy. So he started taunting them. Shout louder. Maybe he can't hear you. Maybe it's to, clean out his ears a little bit. Shout out, surely he is God. Of course, you worship Baal. Of course he is God. Perhaps he's deep in thought. He's just distracted. Or maybe he's busy. Maybe he's off traveling. Maybe he's sleeping. And if you shout louder, maybe you'll wake him up. What we miss here in the original language, that or busy, it's not just maybe he's busy. It's actually a euphemism for on the John. Oh, maybe Baal's got some Montezuma's revenge. Let's just give him a little bit more time. He's just working on a big project right now. So Elijah's getting snarky with them. Like, come on. So, being prompted, they start shouting louder. They start cutting themselves with swords and spears, bleeding on the altar. They are worked into a frenzy. They're going crazy. They're more crazy. They're more feverish, panicked, louder, dancing, screaming, cutting themselves, bleeding. I can only imagine how ridiculous it looked. 850 of these people dancing, screaming, shouting, cutting themselves, cutting others, bleeding on this altar, praying for fire to come down from the fire god. Nothing. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. Time for the evening sacrifice was 3 o'clock-ish. Now, one thing that we need to know about the evening sacrifice, 3 o'clock, Jesus was the final evening sacrifice. Because around that 3 o'clock hour was when Jesus breathed his last and was the final evening sacrifice. So that's obviously much, well, if I go on your timeline, much farther into the future. But the evening sacrifice until 3 o'clock. So they'd been going from morning until 3 o'clock for hours upon hours, dancing, shouting, screaming, dancing, shouting, screaming, cutting, bleeding, screaming. Frantic chaos. Nothing. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid any attention. Now, when I see this, I think about some of the things I think about is and we'll get to this a little bit more in a minute, but I look at the world around us, I sometimes feel like there's a whole lot of screaming and shouting and dancing, and thankfully we're not getting to the point where we're cutting ourselves and bleeding on the altar, but in our world there's a whole lot of this panic reacting to things. And nothing. It's not a whole lot different. It looks different, but it feels a little bit what I kind of feel like it would be like to watch that. A whole lot of feverish, panicking, screaming, shouting. For what? No response. No answer. I can imagine what it would be like to be the people who were watching this for hours upon hours. How many of them were even left? Like, okay, okay, this is insane. Why are they doing that? Nothing is happening. So finally, the afternoon sacrifice, Elijah says to the people, all right, you done watching that craziness? You done watching that chaos? All right, come over here. So the people who were left came over to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord which had been torn down. He repaired the altar of the Lord. So what that means is on Mount Carmel, there was an altar to God, the one true God. And due to lack of concern, lack of attention, that altar had fallen into disrepair, right? 3 years of no rain. Why was there 3 years of no rain? Because they'd neglected God. And it was symbolic in the altar to the one true God. It was in disrepair. It had fallen in ruin. And so first thing, Elijah said, all right, come over here. Let's repair this altar of the Lord. And all the craziness that we've been doing for however long that led to our 3 years of God backing away from us, this altar, not only has it been neglected, but it has literally been knocked over because of all of this craziness. So the first thing he does is he takes that abandoned, disrepaired altar and he takes the time to rebuild it, to re-honor it, to return to the place, the original place where honor lies, and began to fix it. He took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. So he took 12 stones. Didn't say like 12 giant boulders, just 12 stones, stacked them. Okay, this is who we are. God called us. We are Israel. We are his chosen people. And with the stones, he built an altar in the name of the Lord. He took the stones that were cast aside and he took the time to rebuild that altar in the name of the one true God. Then he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of wheat. Now I did the research. 2 seahs of wheat is about a half a bushel. A half a bushel isn't a... So that tells us this was not some huge fancy altar. If he dug a trench that held a half a bushel of seed, that's not a real big trench. So the altar that he built was not some big fancy thing. It was 12 stones stacked in God's honor, in his name, for his glory. Dug a trench around it. He rebuilt the altar. Then he arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. So earlier he'd stacked the deck in favor of Baal, right? You choose the bull, you get all 850 of you. It's been in drought for 3 years. You choose the bull, you go first, take as much time as you need. Fire, I'm choosing your God's thing. Now what he's doing is he's stacking the deck against the one true God. Rebuilds the tiny little altar, digs the trench, and he says, fill 4 large jars of water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Not just once. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Not just twice, but do it a 3rd time, he ordered. So they just doused that entire altar with water. Water ran around the altar and filled the trench. Now you could have taken a blowtorch to that altar, and it was so soaked, even in the drought, it wouldn't have lit up on fire. So he's stacking the deck against God, so that way when he does his thing, nobody can say, well, that was just a spark that obviously was left over from, all the great work that the Baal prophets did. That's not God, that was Baal. No, he's stacking it against the one true God to say, now you will know. And at the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed. He didn't dance around. He didn't scream. He didn't cut himself. He didn't do anything fancy. Composed and assured. Calm assurance. Knowing that our God is the one true God. The one true God doesn't demand some fancy dog and pony show, because he is the one true God. So Elijah steps forward, calm and assured, and prays, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Unwavering, strong faith and trust looks like calm assurance. And oftentimes that calm assurance, that unwavering faith and trust looks like a lack of concern. Because I'm not up here shouting and screaming and, this is important. When we serve the one true God, we don't need to put on a big display because we know he is the one that does the good work that he does out of his goodness, not because I do something special that then warrants his grace and mercy. Calm assurance often looks like a lack of concern. Calm assurance also looks like the ultimate faith and trust. I don't need to shout. I don't need to dance. I don't need to scream. I don't need to make a big production. I don't need to cut myself and bleed on anything. I just need to step forward and pray with full assurance, knowing that God is who he says he is, and that God is going to do what he says he's going to do. And I need to be faithful to step forward into that. He finishes his prayer, answer me, Lord, answer me. So these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Less than a minute, 20-second prayer. Right? Nothing fancy. There's no big fancy these, thous, or nothing fancy in the words he spoke, just calm assurance and knowledge that God is who he says he is, and he does what he says he's going to do. And so that breath prayer, right? God be with them. That breath prayer is all that is needed. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. Then the fire of the Lord fell and didn't just burn up the sacrifice, it burned up the wood, burned up the stones, burned up the soil, licked up all the water out of the trench. And when all the people saw this, they fell on their face and cried, the Lord, he is God, the Lord, he is God. See Elijah's prayer, that breath prayer, calm, assured, confident. It's all that's needed. Everything was consumed. The soaked sacrifice, the soaked wood, the stones, the dirt. I wonder how deep the hole was. Okay, these are the weird things that if it consumed the soil, was it like how deep was that pit? Like, that's crazy. Takes some pretty hot fire to burn up rocks and to burn up dirt. Doesn't take anything fancy, just calm assurance. See, the difference lies in the one that we address. The difference lies in the one we glorify. The difference lies in the one we honor, adore, prioritize, and worship. It's not how we do it. It's who we do it for. And all the people were amazed. See, these people were fortunate to see it. See, Jesus calls us to faith before we see it. Believe and know. I hear people say all the time, I'll believe it when I see it. No, we'll see it when we believe it. We, people of God, we will see the work of God once we believe it. That's who God is. Blessed are they who have seen, but Jesus said, blessed are you, for you believe without seeing. They saw and they fell, and they worshiped. So I come to two big questions. These are the questions we discussed back around Easter during our Lenten Wednesday conversation. What is your Baal? Maybe that's a weird question. But what pulls away your attention, your time, and your obedience from God? What distracts you? When you have time on your hands, and I'm not saying it's all evil. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like you're going to watch football this afternoon. Well, that's evil. You're being evil. But if that becomes the thing that drives you, if that becomes your motivator, work, even family, if family is your motivation and God isn't your motivation, God isn't your inspiration, our family can become our Baal, the thing that pulls our attention, our time, and obedience away from God. And we will see the consequences of that, of messing up our priorities. And so God is always encouraging us to put Him first. I always say I strive in my life to be a good follower of God. After that, to be a good husband. After that, to be a good dad. After that, to be a good pastor, a good director of a nonprofit, a good neighbor, a good friend. But if I get those things mixed up, if I'm not a good follower of God, I'm never going to be a good husband. If I'm not a good husband, I'm never going to be a good dad. If I'm not a good follower of God, husband or dad, I'm never going to be a good pastor or director of a nonprofit caring for others. Now, sometimes I mix those things up. But hopefully at the end of the day, at the end of the week, I can sit down and say, okay, God, I put you first, and I put Stacy second, I put my kids third, and then I know that you're taking care of the rest of that because I've put you first. And God honors that. So our question is, what is our Baal? What distracts us from our number one priority, which is God and His honor and His glory and His worship in our life? When things are quiet, what stirs in your heart and in your mind and in your soul? Is it joy? Is it peace? Patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, all those fruit of the Spirit? Is it hope? Is it trust? When things are quiet around you, what stirs in you? Is it the good things of God, or is it fear, anxiety, anger, frustration? Monday through Friday, I work with people that are in crisis. And I always talk with my team. I say, when I am in crisis, I am the worst version of myself. And so every single person that we work with is probably the worst version of themselves because they are in crisis. What are you like in crisis? When things get calm, do you feel those crisis things rising, or do you find the Spirit of God rising up within you? And I'm not saying you're evil if you feel fear, anxiety, or anger or frustration. That's not it at all. But I sometimes think when I quiet the things around me and I feel what's bubbling up inside of me, I can take those as warning lights on the dashboard of my life. If it's fear, anxiety, frustration, anger, then there's something on my dashboard telling me to pay attention. Check your engine. Because there's something not right in the system. But if it's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, then all right. And things are going well. If it's fear, frustration, anxiety, angst, check engine light. Before that thing starts flashing red, make sure I check my spirit. Check my priorities. See, I'm not saying anxiety, depression, I'm not belittling or demeaning any of that. I'm just saying those are our reminders to center ourselves back in our number one priority. And that isn't always going to make all that go away. It's not that simple. I'm not simplifying it either. But it's going to help begin the correction process. So pay attention to that. Put everything aside at some point this week and just be quiet without any distractions around you. And what do you feel rising up within you? Let that be your check. And then begin to move from there. Second question is, what does it mean for you to repair the altar of the Lord in your life? Has it been neglected? Has it been knocked over? Or do you tend to it on a regular basis? Again, I'm not making any judgments, I'm just asking questions. And there are many ways we can repair the altar. Maybe yours doesn't need repair. Maybe you tend to it every day and you care for it and you honor it. And that is incredible. Good for you. I know I'm not always good at that. And so sometimes I need to do some repair. See, for some reason, we often go back to our false gods, especially when life gets challenging. But what we learn is that false gods provide nothing real or lasting. Since Adam and Eve, we have collected and cherished empty boxes. It's like we see a pretty empty box and we think, oh, that is going to make me better. That's a pretty box. Ooh, there's another pretty box. But we look, there's nothing in there. And so since Adam and Eve, humanity has collected and cherished empty boxes in search of substance, purpose, and fulfillment. But they don't provide anything real or lasting. They're empty. And as we collect those empty boxes, we're never going to be satisfied. We're never going to be fulfilled. There's always the next thing. There's always another promotion. My goal is to, have my net worth be $1 million. Once I'm there, I'm like, wow. What if I was 2 million? What if I was 5 million? I wouldn't mind having that option, but there's always something more. If it's entertainment, there's always the next episode, there's always the next season. Then when you finish that series, there's always the next series. We will never find satisfaction or fulfillment in those empty boxes. So are you done feeling empty, dissatisfied, impatient, anxious, or unfulfilled? It's time for us to repair the altar. Stop collecting empty boxes and begin to merge. To repair, rebuild, and maintain a relationship. Merging is a relationship. As we grow ever and ever closer to Jesus, we begin to look and sound and appear, smell more and more like Jesus. As we grow in our relationship with him, it takes attention, time, and commitment. So how do I merge? We talked about this through the last series. There's no cookie cutter option. So I think, well, if you do this, in 6 weeks' time, in 60 days, you can look and sound just like Jesus. But these 6 simple steps, it's going to be different for every one of us. All of us are different. But we talked in the last series, we talked about spiritual disciplines: worship, prayer, study, fasting, meditation, fellowship, service, solitude and silence, simplicity, submission, confession. For some of you, it's a devotional 15 minutes in the morning. You read, you pray, boom, done. I've maintained that altar. For some, that's hard. It's different. I remember when I first started this process, I was in college in my apartment. I'm doing dishes, and I began a conversation with God that has not ended. But as I'm doing dishes, this is the weirdest way to start like a lifelong conversation with Jesus. It's like, Jesus, it must be nice to never have to do dishes. I hate dishes. But that began just to a conversation, an ongoing conversation. Sometimes it's a constant one, but sometimes, there's gaps in there in my conversation with God. But I always end up coming back and making sure that my altar to Him is maintained and repaired. So what does that look like for you? It's going to be different for every one of us. But whatever it is, it takes attention, it takes time, and it takes commitment to repair, rebuild, and maintain. So this may be weird, but how do we repair that altar? We be with Him. Spend time with Him. That's how we repair the altar. How do we rebuild? We just be. Don't be worried about all the actions and all the doing. Be. That's how we rebuild that relationship, is just be ourselves with Him. And then how do we maintain? Be with Him. Heavenly Father, we thank You for Your word. Help us to be with You. Just be. Just exist with You. Just honor You, to praise You, to walk with You. And as we do that, and we worry less about how things look or big, grand things, and we just live each breath for You and take each step for You and with You, Father, help us to be transformed. And as the world all around us is all in this big, frantic craziness, Father, help us to be calm and assured in our faith and our faithfulness to You as we live this life for You, for Your glory, and for the sake of others, to help others find the calm assurance that You can bring. And the pain we often inflict on ourselves to get some, Father, we don't need to do that. We just need to be with You. And help us to bring that calm assurance to the rest of the world so they can find You and be with You also. You are good. You are so good. And we love You. In Your holy name.